Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Millennial in the Middle. Today's episode is a little different, and so I thought I'd jump on today to give a little introduction to what this is going to be all about, just so you know what to expect before I get into the interview that will be the episode. We talk a lot in this episode about being in the middle, and being in the middle, I think, means that often we feel a part of the silent majority. And I think that being a part of the silent majority often comes from us not knowing what to say with sometimes situations that may be awkward or uncomfortable. And because we either one, don't want to say the wrong thing, or say something and unintentionally offend, or say something that all of a sudden means something different to another, what do? We stay quiet. And so one of my goals of this podcast is to be able to help us be more informed and more understanding of perspectives other than our own. And I think as we do that, we become better citizens and ultimately just better people that are compassionate, loving, understanding. And we talk about that understanding comes from whether it's a historical perspective that changes the way we think about a current topic, or talking to someone whose experience changes the way we feel that's not our own. And so we can learn a lot from that. Now, with that said, that's not something that's always going to be strictly political. While a lot of these conversations we have are going to be specific to politics, and we'll talk about the election, and we'll talk about the different issues that are debated, there are also going to be some stories that we tell here in the Millennial in the Middle podcast that are human interest stories, that are feel-good stories often. And this is what this is what we have for you today. I'm going to do an interview today with Rick and Mindy Guymon, and they have a daughter with Down syndrome who has also battled leukemia and just won the battle of leukemia and is now cancer-free as of just a few weeks ago. And so I'm going to have them tell their story today. And I think we all know someone that has a disability or has children with disabilities, and it's often hard to know how to handle those situations, how to say the right thing, how to interact in a way that's respectful and loving that matches your character. And I've been pretty fortunate because in my life, I have had a lot of opportunities to work very closely with people that have special needs. And for whatever reason, I've had several people that I've had the chance to build very close relationships in my life that have Down syndrome. And it's a community that I personally feel very connected to. If you have spent much time with those with disabilities, especially those with Down syndrome, you know they have a very special spirit about them that it makes you feel better every time you're around them. And that's definitely been my experience. My first was in middle school. I started working with kids that had disabilities. One of my first buddies, I was a counselor to him, but I think really he was more of a counselor to me, was Tim Van Skyhawk, Timbo. And I had the chance to be able to weekly go to an event and activity with Tim. And kind of an interesting side note, we helped Tim earn his Eagle Scout. In the Boy Scouts organization, if you have a disability, there's no age limit on when you can get your Eagle. So Tim was in his 30s earning his Eagle Scout, and that was like one of the coolest accomplishments, greatest accomplishments of his life. I'm not an Eagle Scout myself, but I feel like being a little bit involved in what he did really was something that I cherish, and I still cherish that relationship. And I especially cherish this relationship that I'm about to share with you today with Rick and Mindy Guymon, specifically as we talk about their daughter, Tessa. So enjoy. Thanks for listening, and we'll have a fun time doing this. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to a really cool episode tonight of Millennial in the Middle. I have been excited about this one from the start of this podcast. It's been kind of in my mind for a little while now, and I'm so excited that we were able to do this with Rick and Mindy Guymon, who I'll introduce you to. We're in a little different spot tonight. We are obviously socially distanced, and you're coming from your home, I'm coming from mine, so we may not have as good of audio quality or video quality tonight, but I think what you're going to find is the quality of this family and the quality of this story is going to make up for all of that and more. So we're excited to do it. Rick, Mindy, thanks for joining. How are you tonight?
We're good.
Yeah,
Thanks
fantastic.
for having us.
You know, I met Rick. I work with Rick at the company I'm at, Gig. I met Rick a couple years ago now, and was first so impressed with just Rick's mentality and perspective. And very quickly, I learned about your family situation. And so tell us quickly, you've got how many kids?
5. Yeah.
5 kids.
They're all in bed.
Yes. This is the latest.
Are they all sleeping? That's unknown, but they're all in bed.
We decided to do like a late night podcast tonight. Exactly. This is like the late show after the kids have gone to bed tonight. But, you don't need to worry. There isn't going to be any raunchy content, right? After the late show. But so you've got 5 kids, and I learned pretty quickly your fourth child, Tessa. You just had a daughter recently. Was born and was diagnosed and has Down syndrome. And
yep.
And when I met you, Rick, you were in the middle of, not only does Tessa have Down syndrome, but she was in the middle of battling leukemia, and intense battle, an intense fight. And I was so impressed to be able to quickly, I feel like family, right? That this quickly became that setting. And you know, I personally, this, what we're going to talk about tonight is something that I feel very passionate about. It's something that has always been a part of my life. In as early as like middle school, I was involved in programs where I was around a lot of different kids my age that had disabilities, and specifically those with Down syndrome. I just frankly have always felt this personal connection and this personal tie to, and obviously immediately felt that with Tessa and your story. And I'm really excited to kind of share this with the world, or to all our listeners tonight, of this story of kind of hope, of inspiration. And I love that what you two are all about is spreading that light, spreading that hope. And anyone that comes in contact with you and your family, I think feels that. And so that's my goal tonight, is to help others feel that.
You're nice. I think sometimes we're so passionate about it that we might be a little bit on the annoying side, but I'll take it. So thank you for the kind words.
Yes, thank you.
So let's jump into this. First off, before we tell like your individual stories, there was a statistic that I learned from the two of you that frankly blew my mind. I didn't know. I had been around a lot of people in my life that had Down syndrome. And when I heard this, this hurt. And I couldn't even just imagine this statistic. And I would guess that most people don't know about this. And I've asked you to kind of start on this note to kind of set the scene for tonight. But go ahead and talk about how most doctors talk about those that early on think there may be a possible diagnosis of your child before birth having Down syndrome.
Awesome. Do you want to do that, Mint?
Yeah. So the statistics on abortions for babies with Down syndrome before they're born are really high. And it's something that I didn't realize either until we had Tessa. And I think the amount of misinformation that not only comes from the world, but also from doctors and Google, is kind of what sets the tone for these diagnoses. When these parents are getting this diagnosis for their child, they don't know what life looks like, and they're getting this information from their doctors. Or even after we had Tessa, we went to Google, and Google, as we all know, is definitely not the place to go to find truth for the most part, right? There's as far as living your life and having these experiences, it's not necessarily accurate to the experience that you're going to have raising a child with Down syndrome.
Yeah, I would agree there. I don't think it's necessarily always malicious on the doctor's part. Like there was even one doctor that we saw after Tessa was born, I think for one of your checkups afterward, and he had a sibling with Down syndrome, and he kind of looked at us and kind of apologized that we had a child with Down syndrome. And after he left the room, we were like, did he even get to know his sibling? They're really hard not to love, And so I think what we found out was depending on the country, the number of the percentage of babies with Down syndrome that are aborted is incredibly high. Germany, for example, it's 90%. France, it's 77%. Denmark, it's 98%. Iceland, it's basically 100%. They don't have a huge population there, so that's not a high number, but still the idea is that when you get a diagnosis from your doctor with Down syndrome, it is probably the most common response from the doctor is, it looks like your baby has trisomy 21 or Down syndrome. When would you like to terminate the pregnancy? And that happens in places you wouldn't think it happens. In Utah, where we're known for being prolific baby makers here, right? Big families and all of these things.
You're helping.
Make sure
we are helping that.
Yes. That it happens here too. And I think the doctors, they look at the diagnosis and say, okay, I know that you're going to have a baby with Down syndrome, and that means that you're 50% likely that it's going to need heart surgery right away. You're 75% likely that it's going to have hearing problems. You're 60% likely it's going to have vision problems. You're 1% it's going to have leukemia. There's a litany of things that can come with Down syndrome just because of the Down syndrome, and they look at it as a diagnosis. And they say, okay, you as a parent are going to be dealing with all of these things. Therefore, when do you want to terminate? Right?
Most doctors say that.
Yeah. And it's crazy because what happens is what we did. So we were kind of lucky and blessed in a way because we didn't know Tessa was a birth diagnosis, right? So we didn't know that beforehand that she was going to have Down syndrome. So we didn't do any testing. Mindy was 30 years old at the time, and about 18 out of every 1,000 babies or something like that is born with Down syndrome at that age. When a baby is born with Down syndrome, it's largely correlated to the age of the mother. So basically, the younger you are, the less likely you are to have a baby with Down syndrome. The older you are, the more likely you are. So by the time you're 45, it's like 1 in 30 versus 1 in 900.
But what's interesting is I know a lot of young mothers who have their first child born with Down syndrome. So it's, these misinformations that are getting, spread that in the community we know, but outside of the community aren't necessarily corrected.
Yeah. And so what we did and what we found was when we went to Instagram and we found other people our age that were living with a child with Down syndrome. And we said, this is where we're going to find what life can be like. I'm obviously not a huge Instagram user. Mindy is very good at that and has really kind of guided that part of our story almost, solely. So anyway.
Yeah. So tell me this quickly before we jump into kind of your story of specific to maybe those that don't understand fully what it means to have Down syndrome or what like the effects of that are. Like what really, trisomy 21 or Down syndrome, what does that mean? How does that play out in a person's life?
So physically, there are a few things that people with Down syndrome will most likely or definitely be facing. Hypertonia is low muscle tone. And that just makes it harder. A lot of times, sometimes they'll walk right on track as their typical peers. But, for Tessa, she didn't start walking until she was 3.5. And she had obviously some other health issues going on that I think made it really hard for her to walk that early. But just the low muscle tone. And it doesn't only affect like the physical part, but it also affects their lungs and they have a hard time breathing. Sometimes Tessa was taken home on oxygen for about 6 weeks, and that's pretty typical for these kids with Down syndrome. Cognitive development is affected as well.
Speech. So maybe to answer your question kind of on the diagnosis side. So basically what it is, trisomy 21 is an extra copy of the 21st chromosome. So basically the rest of us have 46, right? Two copies a pair of each of 23 chromosomes. Children with trisomy 21 have 3 of the 21st chromosome. And there are different types of Down syndrome. So most people don't know that either. There's actually 3 types there. There's translocation, there's what's called mosaicism, and then there's trisomy 21.
Okay.
So
in your case, it was kind of unique because you didn't see any of these markers, or you didn't know that before. And so this was a surprise in the operating room. Just had a baby, had your 4th child. I know you've told me this story. I think I learned so much, and really those listening can learn so much from your first thoughts, your first experience, just being real with this. Tell us a little bit about that day.
Well, so first of all, Mindy and I had very different responses to Tessa's birth. Tessa was, before she was born, she was really breech, right? So she wasn't upside down in the womb. And so we went in not knowing we were going to have the baby that night, right? So Mindy was having some contractions. It was about time for the baby to be born, but they were totally different than contractions that she'd had on the previous 3. So she knew what she was talking about, right? It wasn't the first rodeo here. She was like, this doesn't feel the same. And there are some great details that I will spare you that are fantastic.
He's
but
nice to me.
But essentially what happened was,
maybe it's okay tonight. No.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. But what ended up happening was she had never had a C-section before, and she was having the contractions. The nurse kind of came in, and they were doing their checkup and saw she was dilated. And as they were checking, they said, "Oh, I feel a foot." So Tessa was climbing out, whether or not we liked it, right? But the wrong direction. So they said, we're not going to be able to deliver this baby. It's going to have to be via C-section. So 5 minutes later, Mindy's in the operating room. I'm getting dressed in my gown, and we go in, and yeah, maybe you can take it from there.
Yeah. And I think the reason for that backstory too is because it was just everything about that experience was so different than what we'd had before. Including after having the baby. We had Tessa, they were able to get her out safely, and I was doing well. And typically in our other deliveries, the nurses and doctors are excited, and they're, oh, look at her. She's got,
mom's eyes. Yeah.
She's got brown hair. Oh, look at all that hair, whatever, they're talking about the baby, and it was silent, and no one said anything. It was just silent. And I just, we were in a sterile environment, being in the operating room and all of that. And I thought, something feels so strange. And I just thought maybe, it's just because we're in this weird environment. We're not in the labor.
Yeah, maybe this is what C-sections are like.
This is what it's like, and I had expected them to hold her up and show her to me, over the cloth and things. And they didn't do that. They took her right away and got her cleaned up, and eventually they gave her to Rick, and he got to hold her, but I was still getting stitched up. And, I was like, Rick, what does she look like? I'm dying. Like, I want to be able to see her, and I want to hold her. And this is, terrible to have just had this baby and then not get to hold her. Anyway, he sits for a while, and he says, well, she looks different than our other kids. She doesn't look like our other kids. And I said, okay, whatever, that's fine. That's totally fine. And he said, she looks a little downsy.
Note here, that is not politically correct. We didn't know. I didn't know what to say, but I had been around, like you, Connor. I had spent a lot of time in high school and junior high and in church groups and things around people with Down syndrome. And I loved them to death, but I didn't know, and when she closed her eyes, it was really interesting. When her eyes were open, she looked like she had Down syndrome to me. But when they were closed, I didn't see it quite as much, right? So she's looking at me, and I say, she looks a little downsy. And Mindy goes, what? And then she closed her eyes, and I said, well, maybe not. You know what I mean? Because it looked different to me when they were open versus when they were closed. She looked a lot like Baby Yoda, who is the cutest character. But we've since created, our own family meme with Baby Yoda next to Tessa as a baby. And
just those big,
she's that
eyes,
cute.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I handed her, once Mindy was done getting stitched up and cleaned up and things, I handed her to Mindy to hold. And as they wheel us to the recovery room, right? And when we get in there, Mindy says to me, the nurses were typing on the computer, entering the stuff in as we're just getting into the room.
Yeah.
And Mindy said, you know what? She does look a little downsy. And the nurse kind of turned and looked at us, and she was kind. She wasn't mean, but she said, who told you guys? Like, who told you this baby has? I said, no one.
And immediately we knew. When she said that, we were like, oh. We were just kind of having conversation. We didn't really know that was actually what was happening. But apparently, so the nurses and these doctors, they can't diagnose Down syndrome.
They're not allowed to.
The pediatrician has to do it. So the OB can't do it and the nurses cannot do it. But I guess because we said something, she thought, oh, well, someone had said something to them.
And she said to me, right? So she said, she does have all of the markers for someone with trisomy 21. So some of the markers are at what's called a simian crease, which is here in the palm of your hand. It's one solid crease straight across. And another thing is there's a space between their big toe and their second toe. And they're typically, the back of their heads are flatter. There's a little bit more fat kind of at the base of their neck. They're, what are some of the other ones? The eyes and the
eyes is a very common.
And so all of those things, Tessa had all of them. And so they kind of knew, but they weren't allowed to say anything yet. So she said, it looks like she has it, but the pediatrician is the one that has to diagnose it. And he will be in a couple of hours. Now this is 2 a.m. So we're thinking 4-ish. He came about 8. We decided he pulled his hand cart from somewhere close by and, kind of took his time there. But by the time he got there, we knew. Yeah, there wasn't really any question in our minds.
I remember telling Rick, we can wait for the pediatrician, but I know she has Down syndrome. So, and my feelings were just fear. Like, I loved her and I was so happy she was here with us, but I was so scared. And I remember telling Rick, I can't do this. We had just lost his dad 3 months before.
Yeah.
And
suddenly.
And so it was like, for real, like this is happening right now. This is what we're facing. And I just said, I can't do it. And first cry of the night, it'll probably be more. Rick grabbed my hand and he said, yes, we can do this. We can, and we will. This is our baby. We can do it. And I think from that moment on, I was like, okay, we can. That's not to say that there aren't challenges, but you just have to face it one day at a time.
What we wish we would have known is that we wish the doctors would have said something like, congratulations. Yeah. It's going to be a different experience. And the coolest part about one of the coolest parts about this whole story is the doctor that was supposed to deliver us was actually, and I say us, but we're very clear that I have nothing to do with the delivery. But okay. So the one that was supposed to deliver Tessa was actually a neighbor from my neighborhood where I grew up. And the day after she was born, he was the one on call. And so he came around to do rounds and he waited until the evening for us. And he spent 2 hours in the hospital room with us and explained how his younger sister had severe disabilities. And he took care of her after his parents died. He and his wife took care of her until they moved into my neighborhood when I was 17 or so. And so he said, yes, there will be challenges and yes, it will be different. He said, but he was the one that said to us, congratulations. He was the one that said, this is going to change you guys and your whole family and everyone that knows her in really wonderful and incredible ways. And it was really just kind of him and my mom that had that perspective for us. A lot of, most people don't know what to say when you say you have a child with Down syndrome, just like they don't know what to say when you say your child has leukemia. It's a very similar thing. And it's not similar at all, which is the interesting part. What we wish we had known was that we were now part of the best club that we never knew we wanted to be a part of. Yeah. The community, the people, the joy is unbelievable.
Well, I think that story is so cool and you've explained before, like almost feeling that, oh, sorry for your loss, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
like that this was this sad thing, but changing that perspective of, no, this is unique. It's maybe a little different, right? But it's fantastic. It can be awesome. And I love how you said, going to Google wasn't where you found what life was going to be like with Tessa. It all of a sudden became, social media was this really positive way to see, there are a lot of accounts out there that are parents showing what life is like with children with Down syndrome or with, lots of disabilities.
Any disability. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And all of a sudden that has become this tight knit community that I have got to like peek in and see a little bit over the last couple of years. I tell all of my friends, I'm like, I was looking at your Instagram account recently and looking at our mutual friends, and I'm like, I know those 30 people don't know you, but they follow you because of me, right? But I think that's the thing. Like, they see those posts, they see what you're putting out, and it is light. It's hope. I can't tell you how many times personally I have looked at your Instagram feed, and let's face it, we get on social media and it's a lot of crap, right? I mean, this is a podcast that often is about politics, right? And like, man, there's a reason we turn it off. And all of a sudden you see Tessa and your family pop up on the screen, and it is a break from that. And it is what we need. And so that has become a lot of what you have tried to do, right? In that perspective of sharing with all of us, which you don't have to do, but sharing with us, the light of Tessa. And so tell me a little bit about starting that Instagram page and what is some of the experiences that have come about because of that.
So yeah, when we had Tessa, I had a few friends say, oh, you need to start following this person and on Instagram, and following strangers, people that I didn't know, was very foreign to me. And so at first I was like, oh, I feel a little awkward, like looking into their lives and I don't know them. But as I started to do that, I found, like you said, truth in what it really means raising a child with Down syndrome or with special needs. And so, there were plenty of accounts out there, lots of amazing people. And I just thought, they're going to take care of it. I am just going to continue raising Tessa. And
some of these accounts have hundreds of thousands of followers. It's not like these are small accounts either. Like, they're doing an incredible job,
amazing job.
And so we kind of go with our, at the time,
I didn't feel super comfortable, sharing. I'm a shy person. So to put myself out there just seemed, against my personality. But I just kept feeling a nudge to start this account. I just kept feeling this prompting that I needed to start it. And so in December of, I think it was like 3 years ago, I just thought, well, I'll just start this. And then that way I can, share about Tessa and kind of start a journal, start writing about what our lives are like, the difficulties that we're finding. And it was a wonderful way to get involved with the community, because then these people see your account and they see Tessa, and then all of the, you just kind of form these friendships online. And, eventually a few months later, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And that's when I really felt like, okay, wow, this is a different experience than even within that community.
It's about a 1% chance
that we can share with others. And, just like with the diagnosis of Down syndrome, if someone faces that leukemia diagnosis in the future, can look to Tessa and what we've experienced and see kind of what to expect a little bit. Like everybody's experience is going to be different, but I just felt like, okay, I think this is a big reason why we were meant to do this and why we felt that, kind of prompting to start the account. And it's incredible. I really do feel like God has stepped in a lot for us and connected us with certain people for a purpose. We had a friend who we had connected to on social media who has a child with Down syndrome.
So she was like the first one of the first ones you followed, right?
Oh, are you, yeah. So yes. So, there's quite a, it's amazing. Like how many we've been able to connect with. Um, little Indy, is that who you're talking about? So we became friends with, her name is Tara, and she has a little daughter named Indy. And
2 months older than Tessa.
yeah,
One of the very first accounts that Mindy found of, hey, here's what life is like with Down syndrome. And day one, Mindy came to me and said, I love this little girl and this little family.
and it's the same kind of thing. Like you go to their feed and you just see her smile and just how sweet she is. And I would show her picture to like all of our family members. You have to see this little girl. She's the cutest thing. And she reminds me of Tessa, you know, their personality traits and things. And anyway, we ended up getting diagnosed and getting admitted right to the hospital
on Halloween, on Valentine's Day. It's the same to me. On Valentine's Day of 2018.
Yeah, and then her little Indy was diagnosed and admitted to the hospital the next day. And then we had another friend who we had also connected with. Well, actually, I think we met them after in the hospital. They have a little boy named Edward who, so right now, they've all been through so much. Edward had AML. There's two types of leukemia. Tessa had, I like to be able to emphasize that, had ALL. And Edward had AML and Indy had AML as well. Edward has now gotten ALL.
So basically AML, Edward and Indy had AML and Tessa had ALL. She was the only one. They both went through the full treatment. They've both, Indy has a really incredible story. But then Edward finished his treatment and was it 11 months later?
I think almost a year, but not quite a year. Yeah.
Was then diagnosed with what Tessa had. So Edward has had both, right? And
I've been able to talk with her mom, with Edward's mom a lot as she's been going through the ALL treatment because it's very different than the AML treatment. And we have another friend who we connected on Instagram who we had never met. And she sent us the most amazing, like this big board, like that had all these busy activities for Tessa. Like
while she was in the hospital.
Spent hours on this and sent it to our house. And fast forward a year or two, and now she has ALL as well. And so we've been able to connect that way and just, support each other and not feel so alone. Because I think when you're already in the minority of having a child with special needs, and then add on top of that another life-threatening circumstance, it just makes you feel very alone. And so to be able to connect with these families has been truly a lifesaver. And I just want nothing more than to be able to help other people and to be able to have them look at Tessa and see, what she went through was incredibly hard, but to see her now and thriving and healthy is just, it's a miracle.
And I would say there are parts of having a child with Down syndrome, I think that are easier than people with other disabilities, right? I think where it would be the hardest is having a child where people can't look at them and know they have a disability. And I think there's this silent group of people that feels totally alone, and they get chastised by people at the supermarket because their child's behaving some way, or they get, and when if you really get to know what's going on in people's lives, I think the vast majority of people would say, your life's hard. And I'm glad I don't have your life. You know what I mean? No matter what you might have, it's, I think our trials and our tribulations are kind of custom to what we can handle, Yeah.
No, I love that. And this kind of segues into what I wanted to ask about next was, you have been gracious enough to share your experience with the world in a lot of sense, right? With a lot of people from all over that don't know you from Adam, but know that account and have gotten that inspiration. And I think with that, like someone like me, or, we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are millennials that are younger, right? And what advice would you give of like what sometimes it's hard to know the right thing to say, right? Especially when someone's going through a hard time like that. I mean, I learned this from you very quickly. I have always said, oh, that Down syndrome child, right? Like I've used that phrasing, and all of a sudden you teaching me, no, that Tessa's not Down syndrome. Tessa has Down syndrome. And
Sure.
that little tweak of like, that doesn't define her. That's true with any disability, right? And I think those little things are what we need to hear. And it's hard to be able to have those conversations. That, the whole point of this podcast is to have an open place where we can talk about this so that we can put our feet in other people's shoes and feel that. So, that experience, like you said, in the grocery store, how do we react to that?
No, that's a really good question. And I would even say that's something that should be applied broadly to all humanity.
Yeah.
Right. So I think defining people first as people would do a lot of good in this world. They're not a Democrat. They're not a Republican. They're not a leftist or a rightist. They're not a label. They're a human that has very individual experiences, needs, and wants. And I think the more that we lump people together, and there have been many philosophers in the past that have made the same statement, but I think the more that we group people and lump people together, we, in a way, do damage to them, right? Like every person is different. And so I think we would say, of Tessa, that Tessa has Down syndrome. She's a child with Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. I would say Tessa is also, you don't say that autistic child. You say a child that's on the autism spectrum, or a child that, has autism, or things like that. When the same thing, this person who happens to be left-leaning or, whatever it might be, they're people first. I think that's kind of the methodology behind that. It's not necessarily just that. It's just opening it up to recognize that we are all people and humans and in the same human family, and recognizing that. And I think just by doing that for other people, you will then in turn respect and love them more, because you first realize what you have in common. And that's the vast majority of things. There might be things that you think about differently. You might perceive the world differently, but you are both humans with blood running through your veins, with a mother and a father, whether they're here or not, whether they've been around in your life or not. You are people, and our goal should be to help and kind of move the human race along, rather than define us by some small characteristic of what we happen to have or do or be.
Yeah. And my mom always says, my mom is full of wisdom. It's funny. I talk about, we're always on the same page with things. I feel like, shout out to my mom, right? She always says, err on the side of generosity and compassion.
Yeah.
And I love that, right? Like, you're never going to regret being overly generous or overly compassionate, right? Yeah. And I think the more you start to recognize that mentality of everyone has different experiences, they've been through different things, through the people that you've connected with all over the world, maybe an experience or two of people reaching out to you that has been like anything that really sticks out to you, of just the goal of your account of sharing that love just coming to light.
Yeah, I think Mindy should answer that. Can I step back just one thing really quickly on the prior question? Because I don't think I did a very good job actually answering what you asked. And here's what I would say. We've had people that have said, oh, your child, Tessa, is beautiful for a baby with Down syndrome, right? We've had people say, and other people just say, oh, Tessa is beautiful. And that difference, that difference, if you see somebody at a store who's struggling, if you see, just say, hey, your child is beautiful and they're lucky to have you as a parent. Just wanted you to know that. And then be okay with the fact that child's going through something right then. And it might be in the middle of the store, because guess what? The parent doesn't want that to be happening.
Yeah.
They're more embarrassed, obviously, than the child. And they're going to be way more embarrassed, but in a good way, when you just say, hey, I want you to know you're doing a great job. If you just said that, if people would just do that and give people the benefit of the doubt, I think it would go miles and miles in a good direction.
And I think to go with that, when we we're out and about with Tessa, we do get looks, right? We're different. People look at us. We're a circus, basically, because we've got 5
Plus
kids.
the 5 kids, yeah.
So we do get a lot of attention. And then when she was going through chemotherapy, she was bald. So we had, a child with Down syndrome who was bald, and we're always wearing masks, which now you don't stand out as much. But you did,
We were doing that before it was in. That's literally the only thing we've ever been like thought leaders on.
Oh, yes. But anyway, I think rather than, I don't mind, because sometimes I catch myself staring at another family. If they have a child with Down syndrome, I'm looking at them thinking, ooh, do they have Down syndrome? Do they not? And we're always going like, do we approach them? Like, what do we say?
Yeah.
And some people, as far as, we can only speak for ourselves, but I'm a group of, on a bunch of different forums for families with kids with Down syndrome. And most people love it if they are approached and just ask questions. I think always err on the side of honesty as well. Even if you have a friend who just had a child with Down syndrome, rather than saying, I'm sorry, say congratulations, like we talked about.
You had a human, and congratulations.
And ask them how they're feeling about it. Before you kind of go into doom and gloom, how are you feeling about this? How does this make you feel? What are you, how can I help you? If you see a person in the grocery store that is struggling with this child, how can I help you? Oh, if your child is curious, we have a little one who,
him,
he speaks his mind and has said and asked things to people that you just are like mortified, right? You're just like, oh no, don't ask that question. But in all reality, at least I really appreciate it if people approach me and ask the questions. I'm happy to talk about Tessa. I'm happy to talk about why she's bald or why she's wearing a mask or why she looks different. I think that open conversation allows for education. So I just think that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah. I think the tendency, the easy thing to do, you're in the grocery store walking down the aisle, like you just said, is to just look away, to ignore it, to not say anything. And that just doesn't feel right,
Yeah.
And I think hearing that from you, right, of, maybe it's just a smile. Yeah, you're not going to have the conversation there, yes. But it's that, just understanding and love, that compassion that comes with that. And I think that's so cool to see as that's shared. I do want to get to that point of, with your profile, have there been any experiences that you've had that have really stuck out to you of like confirming, this is why I have this account, or this is why I'm so glad I'm sharing this and doing it?
Yes, for sure. Like I was saying, I've told people this before. Sometimes it's overwhelming and it's uncomfortable for me to share that much about our lives and be that vulnerable. But it's pretty incredible. There'll be days when I'm just like, okay, I can't do it anymore. I can't, it's too much. I've got, these 5 kids. I have to take care of.
She means Instagram, just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah. Keep continuing sharing about our family. Anyway, it will be one of those days that I'll get a message from somebody. I got a message once from a woman who told me that she was pregnant with a baby who had Down syndrome, and her doctor and her husband were encouraging her to abort the baby. And, she eventually did abort the baby because of kind of the pressure that she was feeling from them, and just kind of the attitude toward that life that they were feeling. And it kind of rubbed off onto her, and she just thought, okay, she felt cornered.
She said that she didn't know that Down syndrome was compatible with life. And we hear that a lot.
Doctors will say that Down syndrome isn't compatible with life. And then she gets on to our Instagram page and sees Tessa, this little girl who at the time was fighting cancer, and still fighting cancer, was so full of life and so full of light and joy. And my heart just broke for her because of her regret, because of how she was feeling, because of the misinformation that she was given. She looked at Tessa and she said, I look at your account and others. She mentioned others. And I think that could have been what I could have had, And so I just think, wow, if Tessa can do that for one person, it would all be worth it. If she could save one life, and change one person's mind about what it means to have a child with Down syndrome, it would so be worth it. And I've had other messages. I had another message just the other day that someone said, you've changed my perspective of Down syndrome. I have messages that people send and say, and I'm not saying this to say that I do all of this good, but it's just, and in all honesty, it's Tessa. It's not me. It's, her smile and her light that she shines. And people will say, I had a really, really bad day. Something terrible in my life happened, and I happen to get on and I have to check your account because I have to see Tessa's smiling face, and it just brightens my day. And I think it's so worth it. If I can, if we can change that perception of what having a child with Down syndrome is, it is so worth it to me. And if we can brighten people's lives, it is so worth it to me.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's interesting because my whole thought in starting this podcast, right, is I think a lot of us just stay quiet, right? When we all have experiences, we have things that we've gone through. Everyone's tough is different, right? Like we have life experiences that other people can benefit from. But I think often in society, we're told not to share that, not to speak up. And I think you both are such good examples of you have light to share and you've done that. And so, to end this on a positive note, we said earlier, Tessa had leukemia. We just had the party of beating leukemia for the update. It was the COVID-friendly drive-by parade. This is the greatest show, right?
Yep.
Her favorite show, which is awesome. And anyway, if you are looking for a little bit of that, go follow this account. I'll tell you, it's Guymon Tribe, Guymon Tribe. And that's what it is. It's a tribe, it's a family, and we're all in this together. Anything you two want to close up with?
You want me? No, I appreciate the opportunity. We're grateful anytime to talk to people about how wonderful both having children and having even children when they come different than what you expect. I also want people to know that it's okay to mourn the baby you thought you were having. Don't feel guilty about that. We didn't know, right? We didn't know we were going to have Tessa. And I think in the beginning, Mindy, like Mindy said, she loved her to death. She would do anything for her, but she mourned this life where she wouldn't constantly be worried about her health. It's okay. It's okay to have the feelings and they will change over time. As you get used to it, we all go through those things. And if you know someone or see someone or are someone who's having, this kind of an experience of a child with disabilities, we would love to be the first ones to say, congratulations, welcome to the best club that you never knew you ever wanted to be a part of. It's incredible here.
I like that. And thanks for allowing us to look into the club and feel a little bit a part of that too. Even though we may not be official, we feel a part of it. We appreciate that.
Oh, you're official.
Rick, Mindy, we appreciate that so much. I appreciate you coming on and doing this with me so much. It is past our bedtimes, I think, and the kids stayed asleep the whole time, so that's good.
Yeah.
Success.
So let's wrap this up. I end every episode the same way. Clowns to the left me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. All righty. We'll see you later. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks. Yeah.
Till next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.